Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, so much in the news. However, prior to all these news stories, the fires, the presidential election, all these trending stories, we were focusing on this man you see on the screen, Luigi Mangione. And several people are saying now, which some of the things we predicted early on, that his motive was corporate greed. And it doesn't really make all that much sense when you realize that Luigi Mangione came from a really entitled background. He was an Ivy League tech graduate from a prominent Maryland family, and he had suffered some physical and psychological pain. Is that what's behind this? The online version of him was an Ivy League tech enthusiast who flaunted his tanned, chiseled looks in beach photos and party pictures with blue blazered frat buddies. He was the valedictorian of the prestigious Baltimore Prep School who earned a bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania and served as a head counselor at a pre-college program at Stanford University. With his credentials and connections, he could have ended up one day as an entrepreneur or the chief executive of one of his family's thriving businesses. Instead, investigators suspect he took a different path. And we all know what he has been accused of. He's the alleged shooter of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. The why. We all question the why, and we've gone through this on numerous stories about this case. But we still ask the why. Was there a mental illness? Was there a radicalization? Was it really that he hated corporate America? The same corporate America that he was from? The background that he was from? Is that why? Is that the why? We question that. It's almost like shooting yourself in the foot. This is who you are. And now at the age of 26, you've garnered so much hatred for a CEO of a corporation by the name of United Healthcare. Is that what your whole life was going to be about? Because now that's what it is about. You've made your whole life about this. So we're going to dissect some of these questions we have tonight. And we're going to dig deep into why Luigi Mangione chose this route and where he's going and what we can expect in the immediate future. So hold on to your hats, hold on to your integrity, hold on to your voice, hold on to your loved ones. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me tonight, I know all you guys are going to be thrilled to hear, is a fan favorite, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Mike, recently, people have been saying, specifically TMZ, I'm going to play a clip from that. They were on Banfield this week, and they think that they have discovered the motive for Luigi Mangione's alleged actions in the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Your thoughts?
Bill, strangely enough, after the planning of this horrible murder in cold blood in New York City in December, it turns out that he may not have had anything at all to do with United Healthcare or Mr. Thompson. But it appears now, from what we know now, we'll know more, 6 months from now. But from what we know, it appears that he had a corporate greed was the target. Just generalized corporate greed. Large corporations in America, perhaps we don't know why, but he picked out corporate greed as a reason to begin coming up with some sort of mission in his life. And he did some strange things to kind of show what he was doing, books, things like that, taking trips, meeting people, bouncing ideas off people, talking about Ted Kaczynski. But it was all this generalized anger towards corporate America as a whole, as a concept, but not about any particular corporation whatsoever. He could have picked out many corporations that you could criticize in America, but for some reason he had a generalized anger towards corporate America. And then when he acted the very first time, he acted towards a corporation that he had, so far as we know, he had no dealings with whatsoever. So that's really strange. We'll learn more as we go on, but it's very strange beginning.
Mike, one of the things is also his family, who have quite affluent.
Mm-hmm.
He owns reportedly 12 nursing homes.
Right.
That is being in the healthcare business big time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is corporate America.
Sure.
Right? They owned golf courses, country clubs, a lot of land, a lot of real estate. That is the definition. So how do you, it's almost like self-hate. Are you hating yourself? You're hating your family, and then take this action to make this kind of statement. It's sort of, I think, leans more towards mental illness, in addition to his activism, his political views. But I think it also points towards mental illness. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, when you look at his life and how he was raised, very affluent, Maryland. He had the great prep school. I'm sure that costs a huge amount of money every year. He was an overachiever in school. And the undergraduate level, he went to UPenn. That's a Ivy League school, got his bachelor's degree there, got his master's degree there. He's very accomplished, and he had the best of everything in life that his parents could afford because of their corporation and the money that they made. So in a weird way, he benefited so much from his parents' involvement in American capitalism. They weren't civil servants. They weren't poor. They weren't middle class. They were very affluent. Maybe as he's come into his maturity at age 26, now he's got a few years to be away from his parents on his own. Perhaps he looks back. Maybe there was a little bit of a growing sense of maybe guilt over what he had and just took for granted for so many years and didn't realize maybe how privileged he was compared to many other people in the world. Maybe there was a little bit of guilt. We don't know. But yeah, it appears that he seemed to just go a little bit overboard when he got an idea in his head. And there's some comments about how he would talk to people. He was very insistent, very one-dimensional when it came to issues. And he thought that he knew better than other people, and he liked to talk about his feelings to other people. It was a lot of outgoing message. He seemed to have been a little bit, if you want to use the term, radicalized, maybe by reading material, talking to other people. But, a lot of it is on his shoulders. He felt that perhaps where he was in life at age 26 was not where he wanted to be. And maybe he felt a little guilt about how he had lived his life, and he wanted to change things. It seems like changing everything, changing the way we look at corporations, changing the idea about corporations. He felt that he needed to do something, to make a statement, to do something bold with his life. Unfortunately, murder, is never the way to make a change.
Mike, all the things that you just said about Luigi Mangione, no doubt is true. However, many young people support him.
Right?
Many young people turned out to his court hearings, his court, uh, when he was present in court, both
Yeah.
federal court and state court, people protesting, many people online supporting him. It's
Yeah.
showing, I think, the hatred perhaps for what he describes as corporate greed, undoubtedly the hatred for the healthcare industry. Anyone who's ever been turned down on a claim, anyone who can't get the drugs they need because they can't afford it, that's in this country, that shouldn't even happen. No doubt that should never happen. However, as we said, many people were saying, and I'm not one of them, that what he did was honorable. CEO Brian Thompson, a father of two, a husband, a corporate head, he deserved it somehow. And I don't understand that way of thinking because it sort of condones murder, and I could never do that. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, we see this with the recent presidential, election. We see it now with the hearings going on. There are people who scream out to try to change things, to try to make a statement. We've seen this a lot especially over the past, 18 months with the presidential campaign and presidential election. People like to be involved in things that are bigger than themselves. They get worked up over an issue, and sometimes the human emotion overcomes the human ability to rationally think about a situation and how to come to a rational decision about how best to make things better. And you're right, many people have come to his defense and saying, what he did was right, and it's like he should be, praised, and that if I was on the jury, I would never vote to, convict this guy. The strange thing is, if those people calmed down and sat down and you asked them a question, okay, what would happen if you were in charge of Ford Motor Company and you built a car and it was built poorly and somebody died? Would they be justified in killing you? Would you kill somebody who cooked dinner and somebody got sick? At what point do you justify murder? Who do you think is deserving of murder and who isn't? And if you start talking to people like that, then they're going to hem and haw because they have to come up with a rational, real, concrete answer rather than just saying we love Luigi. We love Luigi. You cannot take an issue in this country and turn it into a political slogan. That is horrible. And for the people who are doing this, they're caught up in it. And I hope that someday they look in the mirror and see what they're actually saying. What's the effect of their words? It's not rational whatsoever.
Absolutely. From the chat, Sorella Lee, when we attribute having everything to having money, we are misunderstanding. Money does not equate stability
That's right.
and happiness. It's shocking to me. How many smart people say he had it all? What happened? Sorella Lee, I agree with you.
Yeah.
However, he didn't just have money. He had smarts, he had looks, he had a solid family, he had a great education. So it wasn't just money that he had. So some of us, me included, I find it hard to understand or difficult to understand why he went to this perceivable perfect life. Although no one, we all know, everyone is a part of the human condition. And no matter how much money you have, how many possessions, your looks, how smart you are, the human condition is the same for everybody. It's a struggle. So he did struggle, and his struggle came out in a horrific alleged event where the CEO of United Healthcare was murdered on the streets of Manhattan. Sorella Lee, thank you for your comment. Very intuitive, and I agree with 90% of it. It's just that he had more than money. I want to play this from News Nation.
This is one of those stories, Harvey, that it just defies all other true crime stories. There's so many twists and turns, and yet TMZ has found even more. You have discovered some friends that Luigi Mangione traveled with in Thailand who have quite a few stories to tell.
Oh, they do. So this was back in March. Luigi was in Thailand, and these two guys from Germany met up with him. They actually just met in Thailand, and they hung out and they traveled together for a week and a half. One of the interesting things was that they were all planning a day at the beach. Luigi instead went to a shooting range, and they found that really odd.
Well, in view of what occurred, it actually wasn't that odd. He was practicing.
And during the trip, Luigi was talking about this book that he was obsessed with. And this kind of gets to what this assassination was really about. Everybody thinks it's about health insurance, that Luigi had a particular grievance about health insurance. It's not true. Luigi's gripe was over corporate greed. Health insurance was a symbol of it, but his thing was corporate greed. And there were two books that he got obsessed with. One of them was written by an author in India, and Luigi wanted to buy 400 copies of the book to support the author. He was so obsessed with it. His credit card didn't go through, it got declined, but he was trying to buy 400 books. Not only that, he printed the book out, he annotated the book, and then he flew to India, met with the author to tell him how he could have made the book better. And there's an arrogance to that, but also an obsession. And that's one of the things we found about him, is that he was an obsessive guy. And there is a mental illness based on everything that we investigated. And we went, by the way, we went to Hawaii. We went to Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, Thailand, India, and other places, and talked to a lot of people. There is a mental illness that is underlying all of this with him.
Also, your team has been able to unearth sort of behavioral information about him in high school, where it's quoted as that he had odd episodes, would lash out oftentimes, and yet seemed to be really successful. He's valedictorian at high school.
You know, that's one of the things that fascinated me too, that if you look at the veneer here above the surface, he had everything going for him. He's a good-looking guy. He's smart, undeniably smart, well-read, successful. But, you know, it's one of the things that I learned doing my job here is that, you know, when you're covering people, there's kind of this gloss and illusion about Hollywood. And it's all none of it's real, you know, it's all imagery. And he was able to compartmentalize his life, or has been able to, where for the most part, he's a fun-loving, smart, engaging guy. And there were signs of what you just said that would erupt from time to time. But he was able to function pretty well all the way through up until months before the murder.
Have you, I mean, listen, I think I know the answer here, but I've got to get it straight from you. Have you been able to process the reaction to this criminal, well, this alleged criminal, the outpouring of love, the social media, the people who are willing to just die for Luigi? I just don't know that I've seen this kind of a reaction in true crime before.
I guess I'm a little bit cynical. So, yeah, I mean, it is upsetting, but not entirely surprising to me. I mean, look, young people, corporate greed is a thing with them, and they are struggling to succeed. And they blame it on the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and people like that, and the healthcare industry, you know, that makes a lot of money, or at least you look at the CEO who made, you know, more than $10 million a year, and they're angry. And so you look at that and you look at what he did and the reason he says he did it. And then you have to look at something else. And I think this is really important because remember, when you look at people under 30, more of them support what Luigi did than oppose it. And I think 80% of that has to do with his looks. He is a really good looking guy. And, I posed the question to some of these people. If he were ugly, would it be the same reaction? I think there would be some of it, but I don't think you'd see it the way you see it now.
Thanks for watching. Go to join.
This guy, Harvey Levin from TMZ, smart guy,
Yeah.
articulate guy. However, he's giving a view from the view of pop culture.
Yes.
He's not not a doctor. He's not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So he's giving his perspective from social media, from television, from the masses, from kids under 30 years old, adults under 30 years old, supporting him. But there's no scientific reason. I want to play a little bit of Dr. Joni Johnson, who we had on our show. And again, she said right out that I can't make an accurate assessment of Luigi Mangione because I haven't interviewed him.
He had a loving family, he had an affluent family, he was educated, he was almost a prodigy in some ways, valedictorian, et cetera, et cetera. And look where, if this is the person who is convicted and he did do this, how did this person end up that way? And I think we have to look at, in particular, where this person was in the past 6 months going forward, because the few things that have come out, and again, a lot of things need to be verified at this point, really do show somebody who changed in the past 6 months. Now, I want to be very clear, I'm on the show with detectives, that explanations, understanding does not equal excuses. There's no excuse for shooting somebody in the back. But I do think it's important to try to understand how this person ended up the way that he did.
So that's from Dr. Joni Johnson, a profiler, a psychologist. She goes into prisons and interviews serial killers. So she has some qualifications other than pop culture. And to make excuses for Luigi Mangione, for the young people that are backing him up about corporate greed, but corporate greed, does it equal the alleged murder of CEO Brian Thompson? Does corporate greed make that act okay, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, it's kind of strange, but you're right. Harvey's talking about pop culture, and for younger people, pop culture and the anti-establishment sort of thing, and maybe people who are, say, under 30 or under 40 may seem to identify a little bit with Luigi in the fact that he was totally dissatisfied with his life and that he didn't really seem to have any sort of goal in the beginning. And so therefore, maybe they do actually identify with him on that much, not killing, but that much. And the fact that he's some sort of, maybe he gets a lot of airplay and he's kind of like a little bit of an icon for a temporary period of time. He's getting his 30 seconds of fame. Everybody gets their 30 seconds of fame. But some people in the chat had mentioned that, that reading those books and being in part of that group in Hawaii he was probably very susceptible, very vulnerable to suggestions. Because when you look at the timeline, he's like 24 and he's in Hawaii. He had a job he got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from UPenn, Ivy League schools. He's got a greater education than like 95% of the United States. Okay. He comes from a privileged background. So he seems to have a lot, but he doesn't have, outside of school, he doesn't have success. His first job, he's working for a car company, True Car. It's a California-based company. He's working online, selling cars and helping them with their software and that sort of thing, as like a software engineer. How fulfilling is that? And so maybe for a couple of years, he enjoyed the money. He enjoyed the time away from, having money in your pocket, being a young, handsome man in California, and then he goes to Hawaii. It may have been good for a while and it's kind of all fun, but after a while, it's boring and he's got like maybe nothing to do. And he's trying to figure out what's his next step in life. After all, you can't keep doing this job forever. He falls in with a group of people, and not that they intentionally set out to do anything radical, but their views about, and the books they were reading affected him in a way that he decided he would go out on his own. He left them. He went on a journey of self-discovery to Thailand, and I think also Japan, where he kind of got obsessive. And Harvey was talking about the book. He found a book. He bought who buys 400 copies, or who wants to buy 400 copies of a book? That doesn't make any sense. Something is going on in his mind, and he's trying to reach a goal. And we're not exactly sure what the goal is. Does he want to come back and teach people, like be a guru? But somewhere along the line, he goes from maybe being very earnest in his beliefs and very strident in his beliefs to a killer. It's, so there may be some elements of some sort of personality issues, but people are very complicated and they have many layers to them, and they may have conflicting intentions when they act. So we're not really sure whether there is some sort of mental illness or not, but it is a very strange and very much like an about face or an 180-degree turn from where his life was going. And that's the puzzling part about Luigi. We don't know.
Absolutely. Jane C. from the chat, a ranking insurance executive, made a cameo in a meeting I hosted today. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. Nobody knew he'd be there today. Dude was being careful.
Thank you.
Jane C., thank you for offering that. After this shooting of Brian Thompson, security and CEOs of all over the state, the country, all had a run on bodyguards, all wanted security after the fact. Maybe, it's the old expression, you can't close the barn door after the horse runs out. And that's what they were all trying to do. Sorella Lee, what he did is unconscionable, no excuse. And for those who praise him, is wrong, but he's not right for reasons we can't know, sad and tragic.
That's true.
Yeah, is it sometimes, I think that when you're not focused on your life and your own life is unfulfilling, that you look for fulfillment in other places where you may not find it, and maybe a dark hole that you look for fulfillment and you simply don't find it. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, in the right place. If you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, share us with your friends and your family, hit the like button. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join and support the Police Off the Cuff family through joining us on our YouTube channel membership. Mike, I can't help but believe it, and Harvey Levin from TMZ said, there is a level here of mental illness. And I think that there's no doubt that that is true. And that's the only thing that I think can explain this in any, and not explain it outright, but maybe say he was suffering some type of mental illness. And that runs right into the potential defense of a mental disease or defect defense, because that's the only thing his attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, can possibly present as a defense with the insurmountable evidence they have in this case. Just, physical evidence, video evidence, ballistic evidence, recovering the firearm, all of those things, his manifesto, his writings, all of those things make this case against him so strong, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it's a straight up murder case. If you take out the idea about that Brian Thompson, the victim who shot in the back, was the CEO of a large corporation, you take that out, what his job was, and all you have is a straight murder. You've investigated many of these, probably hundreds of these sorts of things. It's a very simple fact pattern in that respect. It's not a huge conspiracy. It's just that. And so we see this, and we see all that he got caught with. He got caught with the manifesto. He got caught with the firearm. He had the mask. That mask was like his trademark. He got caught with that. His picture, he matched the description. Everything matched. They got him, on his way back to wherever he came from. They got him on various, as you see right now, all kinds of different pictures. So there's no doubt as to identity, the backpack, There's no doubt that they got the right guy whatsoever. Absolutely, they got him. It's a straightforward case. They should prosecute it as that. Ms. Friedman Agnafalo, she has a uphill battle because, if you do want to interpose defense, an affirmative defense of insanity, then you actually have to admit to the actus reus, the actual shooting of Mr. Thompson, but you have to claim that you can prove that you didn't have criminal mental state because of your mental health issues. And at this point, I have not heard any sort of information whatsoever that he was diagnosed with a mental illness, that he was taking medication for a mental illness, that he was seeing a therapist for mental illness, that his mental illness was debilitating and that he couldn't hold a job or go to school or had poor relations, which is the kind of things that, if somebody did have a severe mental illness, there would be some deficits there in one of those areas. We don't see that. But yeah, I think as a layman and as a police officer, I have to say that his behavior was bizarre, and possibly there is the beginning of some sort of illness that may have been undiagnosed. But the fact is, whatever he has doesn't rise to the level of being debilitating enough where he could not figure out what he was doing, and the fact that it was wrong, that the fact that he was committing murder, and that he had no idea that doing what he did was a crime, or that it was wrong in any way. Absolutely not. He could appreciate fully the actions, the consequence of his actions, because he spent weeks and maybe perhaps months planning out, this killing of Mr. Thompson. So she's got an uphill battle.
Absolutely. Sorella Lee, love this brilliance from the New York Legends. Appreciate you and this commentary. Thank you very much, Sorella Lee.
Thank you.
Pixie. Seems odd to talk about this after so many people lost homes uninsured in Los Angeles County this week. Pixie, I covered the fires in LA almost every single day this week. All right. And I actually do need a break from it because they're going to still be fighting those fires. I begged the audience to make donations. I also talked about the lack of preparedness. So we covered that story. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. I don't have to cover the same exact story every single night because someone may be upset that I'm not covering it again. Meyer R., why would it be considered terrorism versus murder charges? And I'm going to let Professor Mike Geary answer that.
This is a great question, and this is a problem for the prosecution because in New York, this looks like a straight murder 2 case. You intentionally kill someone, bingo, that's it. Murder 2 has a 25 to life sentence, okay? For murder 2 in New York, straight killing. Murder 1 has a possibility of being convicted of you have to do life. There's no parole. You're doing life. And the elements of murder 1 is not only that you did kill, similar to murder 2, but you killed with the purpose of causing some sort of terror in a population, or you committed the murder with intent to change governmental policy. And so that's what Alvin Bragg and the New York County District Attorney's Office is going to do. They're not going to take the easy way to convict him of murder 2 and try him for murder 2 and get a 25 to life sentence. They want to charge him with murder with the intent to terrorize or to change a government, decision making, and they want life behind bars. That is going to require more evidence to convict Luigi Mangione. Both Bill and I don't think that's a good idea because the more you involve terrorism and intent to change government policy, the more you give Luigi and his defense attorney more room to maneuver, because now they can talk about terrorism and how people feel terrorized by the insurance companies or changing governmental policy what governmental policy was changed or did Luigi want changed? He never actually mentioned that. So it's really difficult. The New York County District Attorney and Alvin Bragg have chosen the hard route to go with this case, unfortunately.
You know, Mike, I think whenever a district attorney or a prosecutor, for that matter, overcharges, it backfires and winds up being a problem for them. They should stick with the charges as they are. They are sensational enough and provable enough. And if you inflate the charges, it'll make the case that much more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You give Luigi Mangione, if you charge murder one in New York, you're going to give him the ability to not only cross-examine witnesses that the prosecutor now has to bring in to talk about terrorism, to talk about terrorizing a population, terrorizing the city, trying to change policy, governmental policy. So not only do you have to bring in those witnesses for the government, but now they're going to be cross-examined by Luigi's attorney. And then when it's Luigi's turn to present his defense, Ms. Friedman's going to be allowed to bring in her witnesses to talk about, terrorism and what terrorism means. And, there was no terrorism intended and there's no government policies that Luigi ever wanted to be affected. You're gumming up the works. You're taking, like, say you want to get from point A to point B. There's a bicycle. Okay, you take a bicycle. You could take a bicycle or a rocket. Which is the easiest way to get from point A to point B? You're right. The simplest, most assured way, you take that way and you do that because that's a guaranteed win. You don't know what's going to happen with the other avenue. We talked about this. That it's, to me, overcharging, like you mentioned, Bill. They're making a political statement. I think Alvin Bragg wants to make a political statement. I think the mayor of New York wants to make a political statement. And I think you don't make political statements in this kind of case. Not at all.
Absolutely. This is from Law and Crime.
He's not a symbol. He's somebody who is afforded the right to a fair trial. He's innocent until proven guilty.
Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down the United Healthcare CEO in the middle of Manhattan, won't be back in court when we had expected. His federal court date's been pushed back so that his formidable defense team and one of the country's most successful prosecution offices can prepare to do battle. This comes as we are learning new details about Mangione's background and what he allegedly did to prepare for this apparent assassination. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Luigi Mangione, I haven't talked about him in a minute, so we're going to give you some updates here, but he spent the holidays in the Metropolitan Detention Center out in Brooklyn, New York, the same jail that is housing disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, who is also under federal indictment. And by the way, you might have seen this, there was some reporting that there was some kind of beef between these two high-profile inmates, that maybe Diddy was jealous of the attention that Mangione was getting. So what did we do? Law and Crime, we reached out to Combs' team, and they say that is completely made up. It was, again, kind of an outrageous thing, a little bit of crazy stuff. We'll continue to monitor if anything changes there. I mean, it is something that two of the biggest cases that we've been covering and two of the most high-profile defendants we've been covering are now both in the same detention facility, but we'll see where this goes. But anyway, as Mangione remains locked up on both federal and state charges for allegedly targeting and shooting to death United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on the streets of Midtown Manhattan, New York last month, his high-powered legal team is working to build a defense. And by the way, that is another connection to Sean Diddy Combs, because Mark Agnifilo, who's Diddy's attorney, is married to Karen Friedman Agnifilo. This is Mangione's attorney. And Mark actually is going to be helping out with this case too. So he has a lot going on now in 2025. But now we have learned that as all the lawyers involved are getting their ducks in a row, Mangione's next court date, which may in fact be a preliminary hearing, has been pushed back a full month from January 18th to February 17th. So if it is a preliminary hearing, this would be interesting, because a preliminary hearing is where evidence against the defendant is presented and the court decides if there is sufficient probable cause to move forward towards a trial. both the prosecution and the defense. They agreed on this continuance, and Judge Catherine Parker signed off on it, writing, "Given the nature of the prosecution, the government, with the consent of defense counsel Karen Friedman Agnifilo Esquire and Mark Agnifilo Esquire, has requested a continuance of 30 days to permit both parties adequate preparation for trial proceedings and the trial itself, and that the defendant, through counsel, has consented that such a continuance may be granted for that purpose." It goes on to say, "And it is further found that the granting of such a continuance best serves the ends of justice and outweighs the best interest of the public and the defendant in a speedy trial." So you see those competing interests here. And by the way, I will talk about that defense in a minute, because this may be raised at a preliminary hearing or maybe some pretrial motions. We'll talk about it. But right now,
So, one of the things that I just want to read this one from the chat. Adriano, you have to accept that the police don't have a photo from the face of the person who shot the guy. Adriano, you're 100% correct. And identity, the identification of the shooter could have been a huge defense. Bane would have been in their favor. However, when he's found with the gun, when he's found with all kinds of evidence that connects him to the scene, when his DNA is on the scene, I don't think the identification of the shooter is an issue at this point. Mike?
Bill, you're right. In the beginning, we talked about this, that, they didn't have a good picture of him, and that, he seemed to have absconded from New York very quickly, very craftily, and that he seemed to be successful in what he had done. Yeah, absolutely. Getting an ID, having a photo lineup done, having an in-person lineup done. You've done these a million times. You know how they go. Yeah, it'd be really difficult, because so few people, while he was in New York, actually got to see his face, except for like maybe just a few people, one or two. And we saw that one picture, like the best photo we have, even that his face is turned slightly away. And so, it's really very, very difficult. That's the one right there. It's perfect. That's the one. But with any sort of fingerprint, DNA, he's got the weapon in his hand. He's got the manifesto in his hand. He's got the mask still around his face. He's wearing the jacket that he had. Yeah, there is no worry that you don't actually have a person who could sit there on the street and say, "I saw," and in court tell a jury, "I saw that man, the defendant, shoot Mr. Thompson." You don't have that at this point. It's a moot point. You don't need it.
Mike, because look, as we know in our adversarial system, the prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you remove doubt when the person, the alleged shooter, looks like the alleged shooter, caught on all kinds of video made of stills. His DNA is found on the scene. The ballistics from the weapon that's recovered on his person matches the shooting scene. I mean, that is beyond a reasonable doubt. That is exactly the definition of that. Can Karen Friedman Agnifilo and Mark Agnifilo poke holes in the prosecution's case? Absolutely. They're good attorneys, and that's their job. However, there is a lot of evidence against the alleged shooter, Luigi Mangione.
Bill, I think at this point, Ms. Agnifilo, she's going to be looking to have that defense of temporary, a little bit of insanity defense, but she's also going to hope for jury nullification. And jury nullification is a concept whereby the prosecution can present the greatest, bit of evidence that they got. They could have a slam dunk case, and the jury could just say, "No, nope, we're not interested." They could acquit him, which means all 12 people find him not guilty, and that's it. Or they may have a hung jury where a few people may say, "I don't think so." Meanwhile, a number of people think, "Oh yeah, no, we got to convict him. He's the killer." You have a hung jury, you'll have another trial. So therefore, I think that's what they are hoping for at this point, is that there would be some sort of jury nullification. I think that what they're hoping for is really a hung jury, and then maybe a good plea bargain arrangement. But I don't think that Ms. Friedman Agnifilo, I don't think she's going to feel that jury nullification, complete jury nullification, whereby he's released, like the OJ case, I don't think she thinks that'll happen.
No, I agree, Mike.
Spotted who they thought was the suspect from the surveillance photos from New York that had been circulating, called police because you remember at that point, the suspect, the shooter's face, had been plastered everywhere. So Mangione was taken into custody without any resistance, and officers found multiple pieces of potentially incriminating evidence on him, including a ghost gun, a silencer, and then there were the writings. So Mangione allegedly wrote about his preparations for this apparent attack, his grievances with the U.S. healthcare industry, the reports that Mangione had had back surgery in the months leading up to the shooting and that he'd been living with pain. The interesting part about that is, if we're thinking about a potential motive, is he was never a client of United Healthcare. But prosecutors believe that Mangione targeted Thompson because of his position as a head of this major insurance group that has power over millions of Americans' well-being. So it also raises another question. I've talked with experts about this. Was Thompson, if Mangione wasn't caught and he is the actual killer, were there other people that he was going to potentially target in the healthcare industry? We just do not know. But I will tell you, the most serious of Mangione's charges is murder as a crime of terrorism. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But there have been a lot of critiques surrounding how much of a circus this case has already become. Because when Mangione was extradited from Pennsylvania back to New York, he traveled by not only SUV, but also by helicopter, where he was met on a pier by a swarm of heavily armed officers. The mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, was even escorting Mangione at one point. And while it gave the appearance of wanting to make sure Mangione didn't harm anyone, or maybe I should say that no one were to step in and actually help him, because there was this fanfare of after his arrest, people really came to support him. I think it was also to set a stage that this can't be tolerated, that this is an incredibly serious crime, and we have to warn that any other copycats out there or potential copycats, there will be severe consequences. And just going back to that idea of making sure nobody stepped in, you see, Mangione's name and likeness have soared in popularity over the last few weeks. It's been disturbing to see. Some have been seeing him as a sort of folk hero, a man who may have killed, but did it to send a powerful message about the struggles of millions. Now, others have pointed out that murder is murder, and the support for radical actions, they can have unintended consequences. And the idea is murder can never be the answer for making some sort of change. Now, his attorney, Catherine Friedman-Agnifilo, talked about the drama surrounding her client in state court. This was just before Christmas.
You know, Your Honor, there's a wealth of case law guaranteeing his right to a fair trial, but none of the safeguards have been put in place yet here. In fact, it's just the custody for over a week. He waived extradition. He was cooperative at all accounts. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea was in their arsenal. And to have all of these the press there, the media there, it was like perfectly choreographed. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political. And as Your Honor knows, under Lauro v. Charles, the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has held it to be clearly established that these staged perk walks to the media, unrelated to a legitimate law enforcement objective, is unconstitutional.
You know, it's funny, Mike. Years ago, I remember they said that perp walks are unconstitutional.
That's right.
Yet the police department never stopped doing them. And their position was, hey, if we're leaving the precinct station house and we're walking the perp to the car and the press is there, we can't stop them.
That's correct.
From videoing or yelling out questions. However, this clearly was a staged perp walk. And it was a little, I think, a little bit disturbing. It was like, why did they need all those people there? And then the fact that he was caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania, he was brought to their facility. Then a couple of days later, a week later, he waived extradition and he was flown back to New York City on the police department's jet, which I was unaware that the NYPD even owned the jet. I was shocked, actually. And I'm sure the money to pay for that came from the federal government, because there's no way the taxpayers of New York City paid for that plane. The other thing is, once the plane landed, it landed on Long Island. So there was no way they were going to drive from Long Island to New York City, especially in the thick of rush hour. So they flew a helicopter, and the NYPD has numerous helicopters. They flew them by helicopter from Long Island to Wall Street, the helipad there. And from there, they took him to Brooklyn to be arraigned in federal court. So it was a huge, huge show. And I'm not sure what the reason for that show was, Mike.
Bill, you're right. If the perp walk is staged, it's unconstitutional. If cameras are out there, news cameras are out there as you're walking out the precinct station house, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't shoo them away. They have a First Amendment right to post all that information on the news. So you can't mess with the journalists. This was excessive. I agree with the defense attorney. I can't believe I'm actually agreeing with the defense attorney, but she's right. This was a staged show. He should have been taken out of the jail cell in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and driven about 2:00 in the morning into New York, or, with a convoy of a couple of cars. That should be it. There's no way this should have been done the way it was in broad daylight. And it's all staged. It's all theater. She's absolutely right. This gives her the ability to ask for a change of venue, and she can allege that, Mayor Adams and the police department, staged this and ruined the jury pool, because you now taint all the jurors in the Southern District of New York. Everybody is watching this. And now, therefore, she can allege that they need to have this trial in some other federal court, probably in some other state. What they did was reckless. It was stupid. The mayor does not belong there. The mayor does not belong, commenting on this. It's terrible. This is politics. This is when politics enters law. Everybody enters crime. Everybody wants to be seen, doing something meaningful for their supporters. Because remember, you have Adams is going to be running for re-election in 10 months. So that's when the election's happening. So we're right in the thick of an election season. This is inexcusable. It's short-sighted. You're giving the defense fodder. You're giving them something to argue. And I agree with them on this case. Terrible, terrible decision to do what they did.
Absolutely. Amy Chung from the chat. Interesting, they found Monopoly money in his backpack. Then he traveled to Altoona, Pennsylvania, linked to the Pennsylvania Railroad and Monopoly. It's almost like a real-life Monopoly game. Interesting, Amy, how you found that nexus between the Monopoly money and the connection with Altoona, Pennsylvania, and the railroad and all that stuff. Whether he meant it to be a connection or not remains to be seen. Mike.
Yeah, it is really weird. Why would you think of all the things that you want to take? Say you're going camping, for 72 hours or a week or you're going on vacation with your family. You're going to bring the bug spray. You're going to bring the suntan lotion. You're going to bring, flashlight if you're camping. You're going to bring, the accoutrements. Monopoly money is not something that would be high on my list of bringing. So I think, that's true. It could be possible that he brought a couple of Monopoly dollars to make a statement that maybe the United Healthcare doesn't care about people's money. It's millions of dollars is just wasted on corporate greed, and the money means absolutely nothing to them. And perhaps the idea, because you could get out of New York and go through Jersey, you don't have to go into, you don't have to go that far west before you go south down to wherever he was going to. Maybe you're right. Maybe in his mind, maybe you're reading his mind a little bit by saying, the Monopoly money and the railroad, it's a weird statement somehow that is part of Mangione's overall idea about killing Mr. Thompson. It's possible. Yeah,
very much so.
Is not off the table. Now, I have to talk to you about the defense. I mentioned this because from a legal point of view, I think there's an argument that the top state and federal murder charges could be problematic. For the murder charges committed in furtherance of terrorism, so these are the state charges, my understanding is it has to be done to intimidate or coerce the civilian population. So maybe there's an argument, hey, given how many people have supported Mangione and criticized the healthcare industry in the wake of Thompson's death, there's something there, right? But did he anticipate this was going to happen? Is that a fair connection to make? Not entirely sure. If that doesn't work, then the killing had to be one to influence the policies or affect the conduct of a unit of government. But what does that mean here? Was it to get, let's say, Congress to make changes regarding the healthcare industry? Does that feel a little bit like a stretch? From my point of view, I think that's a bit unclear on that. So I think from a state charge, the second-degree murder charge, which is just intentional murder, that seems to be the most straightforward way by which you can convict or potentially convict Mr. Mangione. And that carries, my understanding, 25 years to life in prison. Now, first-degree murder, of course, when it comes to the terrorism charge, that is an automatic life in prison. So you can see why they want that. From the federal perspective, this is also, I think, problematic because the murder charge there, it is a murder. The way they've prosecuted it is a murder committed while stalking Brian Thompson. But as attorney Serena Townsend explained to us on a previous sidebar, she was very articulate about this. She said stalking is about placing Thompson in reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury. But doesn't that mean that Thompson had to know he was being stalked? Is this a murder committed while stalking? Again, I think that there could be a defense here, maybe not even to bring up at a trial, but maybe to get that charge or these charges dismissed before trial. We'll see.
Mike, one of the things, and he's explained the law very well,
Yeah.
I don't understand why this should be a state case, period.
Yes.
It should be tried by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office with the laws of New York State. Why the feds are involved in this, the Southern District, I have no idea. And it seems like a tug of war between the two separate entities, the two separate jurisdictions. The federal government, they potentially could charge with the death penalty. They could get a death penalty case out of this. But isn't this a straight up intend death, cause death case, which is a murder second degree? And then the Manhattan DA's office even threw in some politics too with these the terrorism charges. And I think that's sort of a huge stretch. I mean, it is on the books, but it's a stretch, Mike.
Billy, it's unseemly. I think it's unprofessional. I don't know why the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District would want to get involved in this case. Politics, and that's the administration. And now things may change in the spring when you have a new president, new U.S. Attorney. However, I would really like to see them drop their case and just let the state do their case, whatever it is, whether the state wants to go with number one or number two. But the feds, I don't think, should be involved in this whatsoever. This is a simple murder case. Mr. Mangione does not appear to be part, at this point, it does not appear to be part of a cult that is going to run around with assassins killing members of large or presidents of large organizations. No, I don't see that. He hasn't articulated that. There's probably no evidence of that whatsoever at this point. It's not like it's a Islamic terrorist cell working within our nation. Okay, that's a different thing. This is a lone person right now. However you want to say that he's been radicalized, this is one person. It should only be a state case. And I hope in the spring, the U.S. Attorney's Office drops the case and lets the Manhattan DA do it their way.
I agree 100%, Mike. Let me just go back to Law and Crime for one last.
Two travelers explained to TMZ that he was often seen reading this book, discussing the themes, but it kind of went deeper than that, they say. Paul and Max told TMZ that Mangione wanted, for some reason, to buy 400 copies of this book. He also wanted to take a trip to Mumbai, India, to meet the author in person. According to TMZ, Mangione was only able to buy one book, not 400. And Max recalled that during the interview, saying Luigi was always talking about the deeper meanings of things, but this was something different. He didn't just want to read the book. He wanted to change it, to get involved in something bigger. It was almost like he was trying to find some kind of purpose, but in a really strange way. By the way, little thing I have to just mention here. This is in any case, but whenever you hear witnesses provide an accounting of what happened in the past, and this is something that's explored both by prosecutors and defense, and I'm not saying this will even play a role in an upcoming trial, you always have to think about, are what they recollecting about their experiences with the defendant, is it colored by the accusations now? In other words, if you were to ask them about Mangione way before this happened to Brian Thompson, would they have said the same thing? Sometimes people look at events differently after something happens than before. Just something to keep in mind. So what exactly is this book about, right? Well, the author, Josh Dolani, told World is One News back in November that the book incorporates tons of new insights from older books. He shared 3 from the book during his interview, one being that charisma is about being comfortable in your own skin. The second being a quote from Napoleon on courage, saying courage can't be counterfeited. It's a virtue which escapes hypocrisy. And the third insight came from a quote from renowned German scholar Nietzsche on miscommunications between men and women, saying the same passions in man and women nonetheless differ in tempo. Hence, man and woman do not cease misunderstanding one another. So these latest revelations from Paul and Max in this TMZ documentary, they suggest that Mangione's alleged radical tendencies may have been brewing for quite some time, right? But the extent of this internal turmoil, or what could be, it really wouldn't be fully realized until he allegedly shot and killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. By the way, how much of this will actually come into evidence, that's unclear, because there's an argument that all of this is irrelevant to the charges. Motive is not an element to these crimes that the prosecution has to prove. Sure, we would like to know the why, if he did this, right? Was he radicalized? When was he radicalized? How was he radicalized? But for purposes of criminal trials and these charges, it may not come in.
So that was what we were talking about. What
Right.
was he radicalized? We're hearing from TMZ that his motive was corporate greed. That may or may not be true, Mike, because there's the only official investigation of the official investigators, the NYPD detectives,
Right.
the FBI agents, the ATF guys, all of these people that are on the case, they will do the official investigation. What we're hearing from a lot of the TV stations, some of them do a very good job of investigation, but it's pop culture. I mean, the whole thing about the Brooklyn House of Detention and he's in the same place as P. Diddy. Who cares? Who actually gives a shit about that? It's meaningless, but it's pop culture and people find it titillating or, just newsworthy in some way, but it really means nothing, Mike.
It's pop culture, and you're right. It is a little bit meaningless, and even they admitted, the host there admitted that a lot of the stuff about going to Thailand and firing a firearm and wanting to buy 400 books, that's interesting for background information to try to figure out what's going on in that little head of Mr. Mangione, but as he said, your motive is irrelevant if they can prove that you the who, what, where, when, and how of the crime, the corpus delicti of the crime. Were you there? Yes. Were you armed? Yes. Did you use the firearm? Yes. Did you have it in your possession? Yes. Did you come into the city? All the things, the transportation in, staying there, and then leaving. All of that stuff has to be proven. Why you did something, we want to know, and jurors want to know, because it helps jurors when they're looking at the case and they're actually seeing it in the courtroom. They're understanding the background of why somebody, the reason why somebody would actually want to shoot somebody. But the prosecutor isn't required. They would love to bring that information out if they can. Of course, it's up to the judge to determine what is relevant and what isn't in a particular case. But the prosecutor would always love to let the jury know a little bit about why something happened, but they don't have to. If they can't prove it, they could suspect it, but if they can't prove it, then don't even bother. It's irrelevant. And remember, the judge, there's going to be so much evidence coming in for both prosecution and defense. A judge might say, we're not going to be talking about a trip to Thailand. What's the connection between Thailand and what he did in New York City? If you can't make that connection, we're not going to have any sort of witnesses. We're not going to have testimony on this. Nothing.
Absolutely. Lynn Hohenstein, there is no doubt he is guilty and wrong, and perhaps he knew sacrifice himself. No excuse to kill. But can Congress look into insurance denials as a silver lining of this horrible murder? Lynn Hohenstein, if that is the case, that if there's any silver lining to this, and again, a man lost his life, if it changes the insurance industry and it disallows insurance companies from negating people's claims, then that might be something, a positive that comes out of a negative. And I cannot predict if in fact that will occur, but that would be something good that could occur from this. Simi Sharp, regarding the media outlets, right, Bill, some do a good job and some don't. So it's good to take all news with a grain of salt, in my opinion. Simi Sharp, you're very wise. That's so true. Was DNA results completed yet? Bo Peep, it depends on which DNA you're talking about. Reportedly, they recovered some DNA on a water bottle left at the scene. There was some, I believe, DNA on some ballistics, the spent shells that came back to him. So yes, there is DNA. I don't know specifically what specific items of evidence other than what I just listed in addition to. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Again, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Ring the bell. Share us with your friends and your family. Mike, your final thoughts.
First, we always have to remember the poor people in LA. Keep them in your prayers. They need it. And donate to the Red Cross. I always ask about the Red Cross because I've seen them in action after 9/11. Volunteers from across the country came to New York and worked, like 12 hours on, 12 hours off to help everyone. So please pray for the people in LA. Please give a contribution to the Red Cross. And in this case, be patient. It's a slow slog through the legal process, but we'll keep you up to date on it. And just think about, Mr. Mangione, what he did, and you have to decide whether or not in your heart and your mind, whether or not you think that was something that was noble or was it cold-blooded. But you also have to remember, Mr. Thompson, his wife and his children now are left without their father and their husband.
100%. Very well said, Mike. Folks, I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Until the next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.